The town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania had seen better days. Once a thriving railroad hub in the 1950s, the slow death of American rail travel left behind crumbling infrastructure and fading memories. Among these remnants stood the Millbrook station, abandoned since 1987, its platforms empty, its ticket windows shattered, the tracks leading to nowhere. On June 17, 2011, Diane and Robert Carrigan, both 32, told friends they were spending the weekend photographing abandoned places for Robert's photography blog. The couple, married for 6 years, were known for their shared passion for urban exploration, documenting forgotten spaces before they disappeared completely. Their Honda Civic was found in the gravel lot near Millbrook Station 3 days later, doors locked, camera equipment missing. They were experienced, says Detective Marcus Holloway, who led the initial investigation. They knew the risks of these old structures. They'd explored dozens of abandoned buildings before. This was routine for them. Security footage from a gas station 5 miles from Millbrook showed the couple purchasing water and snacks at 4:38 p.m. that Friday. Diane appeared relaxed, laughing at something Robert said as they paid. The cashier remembered them asking about the old station, whether it was worth photographing. Cellular data placed their phones at the station property by 5:15 p.m. Neither device registered activity after 7:23 p.m. when Robert texted a friend, "Found a way into the old service tunnels. Signal might cut out. Amazing decay down here." That message was the last confirmed communication from either Robert or Diane Carrigan. The initial search operation involved 23 officers, 6 K9 units, and dozens of local volunteers. They combed the main station building, the surrounding grounds, and the accessible portions of the maintenance tunnels mentioned in Robert's final text. Thermal imaging detected no heat signatures. Ground-penetrating radar revealed no disturbances in the soil. The dogs tracked scents to a maintenance door leading beneath the platforms, but the trail ended there. The tunnel system was extensive, explains former Millbrook Police Chief Sandra Reeves. Some portions had collapsed decades earlier. We couldn't access all areas safely. Parts of that network weren't even on the original blueprints we obtained from the railroad company. The engineers we consulted believed some sections had been modified after the original construction, possibly during the Cold War era. Inside the station, investigators found a tripod set up near a broken ticket window, but no camera. Robert's fingerprints were identified on the metal legs. A single water bottle, confirmed as purchased at the gas station, was found half empty near the tripod. Diane's silver bracelet, a 5th anniversary gift from Robert, was discovered near the maintenance door entrance, the clasp intact. Forensic analysis showed no signs of struggle in the immediate area, though years of trespassers had compromised much of the potential evidence. The investigation quickly expanded beyond a simple missing persons case. Robert's laptop, examined by digital forensics, revealed extensive research on the Millbrook station dating back 3 months before their disappearance. He had accessed old newspaper archives about a 1964 accident that claimed the lives of 3 maintenance workers when a section of tunnel collapsed during repairs. His search history included queries about railroad company ownership structures, insurance practices in the 1960s, and several visits to websites discussing historical organized crime in Pennsylvania. It seemed like more than casual interest, notes Detective Holloway. He had compiled dates, names, specifics about the accident. We considered that perhaps they were working on something beyond just photography. In one folder, we found transcripts of interviews with retired railroad workers, including notes about inconsistencies in their accounts of the U-64 incident. Bank records showed Robert had withdrawn $4,200 in cash over the 2 weeks prior to their disappearance. His mother confirmed this was unusual behavior. The couple's credit cards and bank accounts remained untouched after June 17th. Their apartment, searched thoroughly by investigators, revealed a wall map marked with locations of other abandoned railroad properties throughout the state, with Millbrook circled prominently in red. As weeks stretched into months, the theories multiplied. Some suggested the couple had staged their disappearance to escape mounting debt. Robert's photography business had struggled financially for 2 consecutive quarters. Others pointed to the dangerous structural conditions of the station. Perhaps they had ventured into an unstable area and become trapped or injured. The more troubling hypothesis centered on the possibility of foul play. The isolated location, the missing camera equipment, the cash withdrawal all suggested potential targeting. Yet no demands were ever made, no bodies recovered, no evidence of violence discovered at the scene. "We interviewed everyone connected to them," says Officer Tanya Wilson, who assisted in the investigation. "Friends, family, colleagues. Nobody reported any threats, any unusual behavior beyond their intense interest in the station history. The only odd thing was a conversation Diane had with her sister about a week before they vanished, where she mentioned feeling like they were being watched during their research at the local library." By early 2012, the active investigation had been scaled back. The case remained open but inactive. The Carrigan families established a small memorial bench near the station, a place where friends and relatives would gather on the anniversary of the disappearance, leaving flowers that would wilt against the backdrop of rusting metal and crumbling concrete. For a decade, Millbrook Station stood as a silent witness to an unsolved mystery. Urban explorers, inspired by the Carrigan story, occasionally ventured onto the property despite police warnings and physical barriers. The site gained a reputation, not as the mundane relic of American industrial decline it had once been, but as something more sinister, a place where people vanished without explanation. Then, on April 28, 2021, everything changed. A severe storm system moved through western Pennsylvania, bringing historic rainfall. The subsequent flooding damaged infrastructure throughout the region, including the grounds of the abandoned Millbrook Station. County engineers were dispatched to assess structural integrity concerns after a partial collapse of the main platform. Engineer Terence Walsh was documenting damage beneath the tracks when his equipment detected an anomaly in a drainage culvert that had been exposed by the collapse. "It wasn't on any of our surveys or original blueprints," Walsh explains. "The water had eroded the surrounding soil, revealing what appeared to be a small maintenance space beneath the main platform. That's where we found the metal box. The container, approximately 12 inches long and 8 inches wide, was severely corroded but intact. Inside, protected by a sealed plastic bag, investigators discovered a 9-page letter, handwritten on hotel stationery, along with a memory card from a digital camera. The letter, confirmed through handwriting analysis to be written by Robert Carrigan, was dated June 18, 2011, one day after the couple's disappearance. Its contents immediately transformed the investigation. In meticulous detail, Robert described how he and Diane had been researching the 1964 maintenance worker accident for a documentary project. They believed the official report contained inconsistencies and had uncovered newspaper accounts suggesting that more than 3 workers had entered the tunnels that day. "We found references to a crew of 7 in a local newspaper article published the day after the incident," Robert wrote. "But by the next edition, that number had changed to 3. Someone altered the narrative almost immediately." The letter alleged that the couple had discovered financial irregularities in the railroad company's records from that period, significant insurance payouts that exceeded the documented casualties. Their research had led them to suspect that the tunnel network had been used for smuggling operations in the 1960s, protected by certain local officials. Most significantly, Robert claimed they had been approached by a man identifying himself as a journalist interested in their research 3 weeks before their visit to the station. The man, described as in his 60s with distinctive burn scarring on his left hand, had offered to share information but insisted on meeting at the station. "We realize now this was a mistake," Robert wrote. "He was waiting when we arrived. Not alone. They took our equipment, our research. They've given us a choice. I'm writing this while I still can." The letter included a detailed description of two other men present during the confrontation, one tall with a military bearing, the other younger with what Robert described as cold, calculating eyes. He noted that they seemed primarily interested in any copies of the documents the couple had discovered, particularly concerned about whether the information had been shared with others. The letter ended abruptly. The memory card contained only 3 images: the exterior of the station, the main waiting area, and a blurry photograph of the maintenance door. Technical analysis confirmed they were taken with Robert's camera model on June 17, 2011. Metadata from the images revealed a 4th photograph had been deleted shortly after being taken. Recovery attempts were partially successful, showing what appeared to be a man's silhouette at the end of a corridor, though the image was too degraded for facial recognition. The discovery prompted an immediate reopening of the case. The flooding had altered the station site significantly, exposing sections of the tunnel system that had been inaccessible during the original investigation. A comprehensive archaeological approach was implemented, with ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs deployed across the newly exposed areas. On May 30, 2021, in a previously inaccessible maintenance room approximately 400 feet from where the letter was found, investigators discovered human remains. Dental records confirmed them as belonging to Robert Carrigan. The cause of death was determined to be a traumatic head injury consistent with a single, powerful blow. Trace evidence included unusual mineral deposits matching specialized concrete used in Cold War-era bunker construction. 2 months later, in a separate section of the tunnel system, additional remains were identified as Diane Carrigan, whose hyoid bone showed indications of asphyxiation trauma. The positioning of the remains suggests they were moved after death. Notes forensic anthropologist Dr. Elise Chen, who consulted on the case. They weren't placed together, and the locations weren't easily accessible. Someone with knowledge of the tunnel system deliberately concealed them in areas unlikely to be discovered. The memory card yielded more information than initially apparent. Digital forensics experts recovered deleted files, including photographs of documents from the 1960s showing financial transactions between railroad executives and unnamed third parties. Several images showed what appeared to be a partial manifest with dates and monetary figures. One particularly significant recovery was a photograph of a ledger page with the heading Special Compensation Fund and a list of initials rather than full names, with substantial dollar amounts assigned to each. The investigation now focused on identifying the man with the scarred hand mentioned in Robert's letter. Records from 1964 identified Harold Mercer as the site supervisor during the tunnel collapse incident. Photographs from newspaper archives confirmed he had sustained burn injuries in the accident. Mercer, if still alive, would have been 84 years old in 2011. Records indicated Mercer had died in 2015 in a retirement facility in Ohio. His son, Vincent Mercer, 67, had worked as a local journalist in the 1990s and maintained residence in a neighboring county. When investigators attempted to locate Vincent Mercer, they discovered he had left the country 3 days after the Carrigans' disappearance in 2011, flying to Mexico and presumably continuing elsewhere. His current whereabouts remain unknown. Financial records revealed a series of offshore transfers to an account linked to Vincent Mercer, beginning in 1998 and continuing through 2011. The final transfer, dated June 20, 2011, 3 days after the Carrigans disappeared, was for $250,000. The source of these funds was traced to a holding company registered in the Cayman Islands, whose ownership structure led to a series of shell corporations with connections to former railroad executives. We believe Robert and Diane Carrigan inadvertently uncovered evidence of historical criminal activity that certain individuals wanted to remain hidden, states current Millbrook Police Chief Dominic Russo. Their research into the 1964 incident appears to have threatened decades-old arrangements that were still financially relevant to involved parties. The investigation has expanded to include federal authorities examining potential historical connections between railroad operations and organized crime in the region during the 1960s. 3 cold cases from that era have been reopened, based on information derived from the Carrigan investigation, including the unsolved 1967 disappearance of a railroad accountant who had reportedly raised concerns about financial discrepancies. Former employees of the railroad company have come forward with new information since the discovery of the letter. One retired administrator, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed that certain tunnel sections had been designated as restricted areas even to most railroad staff, with access limited to specific personnel with special clearance. "Nobody asked questions back then," the former employee stated. "The company provided good jobs in a struggling region. People learned to look the other way when unusual shipments came through after hours or when certain areas were suddenly off limits." The station itself has been designated a restricted area, with archaeological and forensic teams continuing to examine the extensive tunnel network that remained hidden for decades. Millbrook Town officials have approved plans to eventually demolish the structure and create a memorial park honoring the Carrigans and the original victims of the 1964 incident. For the families of Robert and Diane Carrigan, the discovery brings a measure of closure after 10 years of uncertainty. They were doing what they loved, uncovering forgotten history, says Robert's mother, Elizabeth Carrigan. They couldn't have known where it would lead. At least now we know what happened. At least now we can bring them home. The metal box that protected Robert's final communication for a decade has been preserved as evidence. How he managed to conceal it and why it remained undiscovered during the initial investigation remains unclear. Forensic analysis detected traces of soil consistent with the drainage culvert where it was found, suggesting it had been deliberately placed there shortly after the couple's encounter at the station. This case demonstrates how quickly evidence can disappear, reflects Detective Holloway, now retired but consulting on the reopened investigation, and how just as quickly it can resurface. 10 years is a long time, but in investigative terms, it's nothing. Cases like this are never truly cold. They're just waiting for the next piece to fall into place. The final line of Robert's letter, partially obscured by water damage but still legible, reads, "If you find this, tell them to look deeper, not just beneath the station, but in the company records from 64, 67. The names are there. The truth is there. A grand jury has been convened to examine the evidence gathered thus far. 3 former railroad executives in their 80s are scheduled to testify about operations during the period in question. The FBI's Organized Crime Division has assigned a task force to investigate potential connections to historical smuggling routes that may have utilized the railroad infrastructure. What began as a missing persons case has revealed something much larger, concludes Chief Russo. The full extent of what happened at Millbrook Station, both in 2011 and decades earlier, is still unfolding. But one thing is certain: Robert and Diane Carrigan paid the ultimate price for uncovering a truth that some people have spent half a century trying to bury.